it's Ricky Molina from the Ricky Molina YouTube channel and RickyMolinaProductions.com. This is a follow-up video to a video that I had made a few days ago explaining that I was on this quest to find a good pair of studio quality recording headphones. And the reason has to do with the fact that, as a home studio recording artist, I'm sure there are many of you out there like me, we can't always rely on studio monitors during the final mixing and mastering because we really can't turn up the volume that loud, and sometimes the room dimensions are not ideal, the soundproofing is not optimal, etc., etc. So many home recording studio artists, such as myself, rely on headphones to do their mixing and mastering. And the problem in my case was that I was relying on a pair of, pretty inexpensive headphones to do most of my mixing and mastering, even though I was using some visual analyzers to help me balance the mix. And some of the visual analyzer plugins that I was using include iZotope's Ozone 8 tonal balance control, where you can actually select reference tracks as well as suggested reference tracks to just make sure that you're balanced properly across the frequency response curve. So your lows would be balanced inside of a range, your subs, your low mids, your high mids, and your highs. And you can get really detailed about this as well inside of tonal balance control. Another program that you can use for visual analysis to make sure that you're balanced across the EQ spectrum would be a spectrum analyzer such as this one from PreSonus. Most DAWs come with them these days. You could also use a very good EQ plugin like FabFilter's Q2 or Q3, the new one that just came out. Very, very useful for doing a visual check for your balances across the mix. But ultimately, it comes down to your ears. And as mentioned, I made the mistake of relying too heavily upon these Sony MDR G45s, which are very good for the mids and the upper register, the higher frequencies. There's great clarity with these cheap little headphones. So they're lightweight and they're practical. You can stash these into a knapsack or a bag of some sort. And you can also use them on the road. And they're good for listening to the environment around you. So if you go for a walk or something, you can actually hear some traffic, assuming that you don't turn up the volume too loud. Of course, I don't encourage listening to music on the road while walking, but if you're in a park or something, these are very practical. The only problem is that they're not very good for mixing because the low end isn't very well represented. In the mixing and mastering process, we basically need to use pairs of headphones that are going to properly represent the widest range of the frequency spectrum as possible, and that they're unbiased. They don't favor one frequency over another, as many headphones do, in fact. So you're looking for a balance across the EQ frequency spectrum. Another thing to look for in a good pair of headphones is a soundstage, and that includes not only the 2D panning, which includes everything from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. You might have the vocals up the middle with the kick and the snare or the bass drum. You might have the toms at maybe 1030 or 130. And you might have special effects going way out in the distance. And these days, in terms of soundstage, for surround sound mixing, you basically need to be able to hear even way back there, which would be almost like a 360-degree range. So not only in front of you, but also in back of you. And we may add that, the soundstage is not just a 2D concept, it's also 3D. A good pair of headphones is going to be able to give you a sense of height and depth. So instruments will appear to come from, up there and down there and everywhere. So that's the difference between a good pair of quality headphones and not so good quality headphones. And here are 4 key criteria that you should keep in mind when looking for a good pair of headphones. So once again, we obviously want a good value for our money, so price has to be reasonable. Unless you can afford to buy the highest quality headphones around these days, which would be something like the Sennheiser HD800s or the Grotto PS1000Es for about $1,700. Now, I've also heard quite a bit about the Audis, LDC2s or LCD2s that are also up there in price. But in my case, I have so many expenses related to musical production that I had a certain budget that I had to live with, and so I was looking at spending anywhere from $200 to $400 or so for a good pair of quality headphones. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 2 pairs of headphones that I ended up getting. I didn't decide on one in the end, and I'm also going to share with you one other review as well. You know, I like to say that there's really no substitute for test driving a pair of headphones. You know, you really have to buy the pair, take them home with you, and listen to some of your favorite reference tracks. That way you can decide whether they fit your criteria or not. And the truth of the matter is that your ears are not like anybody else's ears. And when you watch reviews on YouTube, you know, the strange thing about headphones in particular, it's like these reviewers, they can talk all day long about, you know, how great this particular pair of headphones sounds versus another and all of this. But you have to take their word for it, because it's their ears and you're not able to really judge for yourself via the transmission of the YouTube video. They're narrating to you what they're hearing, and you can't really judge for yourself exactly how that pair of headphones is working for you. It really boils down to what you could use. It also suggests that, you know, if you're a professional, you definitely should be sending out your mixes for second and third opinions. You should not do all the mixing and the mastering yourself. And if you can afford it, you know, if you're a professional, like I said, you know, send it out to a professional mixing engineer. And then when you get that back, send it out to a mastering engineer, or 2 or 3. That's what I would do if I were an upscale, high-level producer. I would not rely on one mixing engineer's opinion of things, nor mastering engineers. I would get 1, 2, or 3 different opinions before I settled on a mix. And I would not necessarily make the final judgment call myself. I would get a small group of mixing engineers and mastering engineers and ask them what they thought about the final mix. No matter what reviewer online is going to say, you have to make the final call. And the only way to do that is if you test drive them yourself. You know, actually go out there and buy them, because these days you're not going to find quality headphones at Best Buy, and you're not going to find the highest quality headphones at Guitar Center or wherever. Test drive them, as I did with the Sennheiser HD650s. I don't know if you caught that in my previous video, but I bought these Sennheiser HD650s and I listened to them for a couple of days and decided that they were not for me. I didn't like the darker sounding veil over the high end at all. The mids came out beautifully. The vocals and you know, guitars, pianos around the mid-range, they came through beautifully. The bass was also very well represented, not too strong, but controlled. I like it that way. You know, I personally can't stand these Dr. Dre headphones, or even the Bose headphones, Quiet Comforts and the like. I don't like them because they're very bass heavy. So something like the Sennheiser HD650s, for example, this would have been ideal for me if the high end was more properly represented. And I found, actually, my listening confirmed what this frequency curve is saying about the Sennheiser HD650s. There's a significant dip when you get up to, you know, 8, 9, 10K that is noticeable. And I personally don't like that. I like to hear the higher end coming through nice and balanced. I don't like that strong dip, that veil or suppressed feel of the high end. Not to say that I like overemphasized highs either, but I was looking for something more balanced. So I ended up returning the Sennheiser HD650s, even though they have an incredible soundstage and EQ frequency response for the rest of the curve. And before I get to the actual pairs of headphones that I ended up buying, I'd like to just mention that these PreSonus HD7s, which some reviewers online on YouTube are talking up and saying that they're good and everything, these are actually hybrid closed and open back headphones. They're kind of like in between. I don't like these at all, personally. I found them to be very dark, muddy, not neutral, and, you know, basically cheap sounding. I found that I couldn't use these at all as a home recording studio artist. So which headphones did I end up going with? Well, the first pair that I got were these closed back headphones, the Audio-Technica MD40x's. As you can see, they collapse very nicely. They come with a pouch. You can actually stick them in the pouch and carry them around with you, but I don't encourage that. They're really made for the studio. This is not something that I would take with me outside in any way, shape, or form, because they're closed back and everything. As you can see, they're kind of clumsy, and that's one of the minor drawbacks, in my opinion. I don't particularly care for this clumsiness. Every time I try to put them on, I have to kind of make sure I've got this right one down here, and this left cup is down here. Okay, now I can put them on. This sort of thing, I got to go through this every time. And there have been 1 or 2 occasions when I've actually accidentally caught my hand in one of these little plastic clamps, and it was quite painful. You know, I survived, luckily, but they're not exactly smooth operating headphones. But that's not really what I'm interested in ultimately. I'm interested in sound and the value that I can get for my money. So, you know, if you put them on like this, they fit okay, a little snug around the ear, and you can notice them after a while. But because they're closed end, you know, you're going to catch a lot of bass in here. And the bass is going to be emphasized more so than in an open back headphone. But closed backs are essential if you're doing home studio recording, if you're miking instruments, like miking a guitar or drum kit or something like that, or if you're recording vocals. And the reason that's so is because the playback that's coming through the headphones is not going to bleed through the cups into the recording mic. That's why you definitely need a pair of closed ends for the home recording studio. So for that reason also, I ended up getting these. Now it turns out that despite the fact that these are a little uncomfortable after 20-25 minutes of wear, you put them over your head, and after a while you'll begin to notice that, hey, I've got headphones on my head. And it is noticeable. And also, because they're closed ends, your ear is going to get a little sweaty and it's going to become a little bit uncomfortable. So you definitely need to give your ear a breather. At least that's the way I feel. And I think that's the case with most closed ends. But some closed end headphones are more comfortable than others. These are not exactly the most comfortable, and they're a little clunky. But having said that, they have an excellent representation of the frequency response curve. From 15 hertz to 24K hertz, this is what the frequency response curve looks like. You know, you've got pretty darn good representation. The lows are nice and controlled. There's a little bit of a bump here in the high bass area, around, you know, 150 or so. 150 hertz. The mid-range is a little underrepresented, but that's okay. It takes out some muddiness and provides the mix with some clarity. Pretty straightforward and flat right across the board until you get to about, you know, 8K or so. And then you get these little bumps around 10K and 15K, which may be a little bit of a problem, but I haven't really noticed it that much. Bottom line is that you get a nice even distribution across the frequency response curve. Very good value for the money. The Soundstage is also very nice. It's not excellent. It's not pristine. It's not as good as the HD 650s from Sennheiser and another pair of headphones that I'm going to review shortly, but it's pretty darn good. And for 85 bucks on sale, I could not pass these up. And I compared them, I A/B'd them against Sennheisers that were lower end Sennheisers and lower end Beyerdynamics as well, and a few Sonys. I was very pleased with the sound I got out of these, and I still am. And since every home recording studio artist needs a pair of closed ends, I would highly recommend these for the money. Now, I also heard a lot about the Sony MDR7506s, and they go for about 80 bucks, but I haven't actually tried them or listened to them yet. So I'm not a good judge, but a lot of people swear by them in the recording studios as well for recording mic'd instruments and vocals. And last we come to the Audio-Technica Airs, the ATH8900Xs. These are open-backed headphones, and these are the ones I ended up buying, and I will end up using these primarily for my final mixing and mastering. These are great headphones. I really cannot say that enough. And at 130 bucks, these used to be 300 bucks 2 years ago or so. The price has dropped, I guess, due to competition, but they're super comfortable. They look a little strange with these two cable-looking like bars over the top of your head, but they don't touch your head. It's these little pads that do. And this kind of looks a little space age and weird. The bottom line is that they're super comfortable. They're light. You don't even notice that they're on. And in terms of the sound quality, awesome. You have an incredible frequency response curve as low as 5 hertz, which I don't know if it's even possible to hear down there. I think the human ear can hear as low as 20 hertz and all the way up to 20,000. So who knows, maybe you can feel the frequencies at that point. But the frequency response curve is extremely wide, as you can see, from 5 hertz all the way up to 35K. And here's a frequency response curve of the Audio-Technica AD900Xs. Actually, it's quite similar to the MD40Xs that I mentioned, the closed backs, when you think of it. But in practice, I got to say, this is not exactly the way I'm hearing things, which is, again, another good reason for you to test drive headphones. I don't believe this frequency response curve is as accurate as my ears are telling me, I find the bass to be much more controlled than this. There's a nice roll off here at around 50 hertz. I don't find the basses to be protruding at all. I find them to be very controlled, and the mids come through very nicely. A very balanced mix across the board. There is a little bit of a bump around 10K and 15K, which is, I guess, a little bit of a problem if all of a sudden you get this rush of high frequency instruments or sounds that are coming in all at once. So you may have to turn down the volume a bit around those periods in certain pieces, but it is not that noticeable. For the most part, a very well represented broad frequency response curve. And I'll also add that the Soundstage is very deep and wide. I found that I could hear instruments from my favorite reference tracks, like I could hear things I never heard before, and it's very reasonably priced. What more can you ask for? The only thing I would also add is that to really appreciate a good pair of quality headphones, you really need to have an amplifier of some kind, a DAC, or an audio interface with a preamp of some sort to amplify the signal. Because I've noticed that when I tried these out on my cell phone and laptop, they didn't sound half as well as when I listened through a powered, amplified interface. So I think what it all boils down to is you need multiple sources to make proper judgment calls. You can't just rely on one pair of studio monitors or one pair of headphones. You really need multiple pairs of headphones, especially for home studio recording artists who mix and master with headphones. I would suggest getting 2 or 3 pairs to make a proper judgment call. One that's going to give you a proper balance across the entire frequency spectrum, maybe one pair that's going to be a little more biased to the lows, and maybe one pair that's going to be a little biased to the highs, and kind of put them together and to try to come up with a better representation of what is close to reality, to enable you to make a more unbiased judgment call as far as balance in your mix is concerned. I hope this has helped you, and if you like this video, please subscribe. I've got some more product reviews coming. Thanks so much for watching. This is Ricky Molina from the Ricky Molina YouTube channel and RickyMolinaProductions.com.